All right, folks, we've got an action-packed show today. We are going to talk to you about our top 3 reasons why you should consider using a professional buyer's agent in a market like this. We're also going to talk about interest rates and what else, Ben?
We've got a lot to cover, Bryce. We're going to have a 30,000-foot view around buyer's agents, how they operate, how the market works. If you're going to play or you're going to buy in property, buyer's agents are a critical element of that game. So we're going to look at that as well.
Exciting show, folks. Let's rip in.
Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to 2 of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, Ben, there we go. Rip into today's show. It's going to be super exciting. But before we get there, first of all, let's welcome you to the Property Couch. How are you, mate?
Thanks, mate. Hey, new intro, mate. Yes.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Notice we updated the thumbnail as well?
I did notice that. Yes, I
did. Only subtle tweaks on that. But we're all constantly trying to iterate on this show, Ben. We have just ticked over 400 and we're not going to rest on our laurels.
Keeping it fresh.
New ideas, and we're always open to people letting us know who they want on, what ideas they need. Send us speak pipes, send us notes.
Love it.
And we're looking forward to adding another layer of growth into the next 100 episodes, Ben. But a couple of things, mate. Something happened this week was I just read the newspaper and the blogs. It appears to be lots of stories about something happening on Tuesday. Is there something I missed?
Yeah, just another rate rise, Bryce. We should be getting used to it now. Yeah. Obviously, the cash rate heads
Newspapers
up.
They love the stories.
Yeah, wow. The clickbait, it is fabulous clickbait in terms of, what's happening in the marketplace. But the cash rate now moves back to levels that we saw before the pandemic. So I think from that point of view, I think that sort of gives a better context, right? So where we are today in regards to cash rate was where we were before we did see the pandemic hit. Now, if you also remember way back in February, March of 2020, the economy was actually moving into pretty good shape, right? We've been through, that quieter period of 2018, 2019, where we did see a property correction, and we were bullish on the property market. If those people are going back listening, you can hear us talking about how we're confident where the market was going. And then obviously the pandemic hit, confidence fell through the floor for the short period of time. We remained calm, Bryce, didn't we? And we said it's actually not a bad thing. And if money gets a little bit cheaper, asset prices normally perform very well, and they did. And now we're sort of seeing them come off their heady heights. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in terms of what's interesting about the property market in terms of demand and supply. But that's where we are. We're not done yet. I did the RBA and economic update earlier this week, and so we've got a bit more to go in terms of moving that cash rate higher. But I think where we are from a confidence point of view, Bryce, is that we're going to probably have that really unsettling confidence, more generally speaking, because the media noise is out there. And so, I think consumer confidence will be quite, shaky for probably another month or two. And then hopefully we'll see some sort of evidence from the RBA around slowing down their numbers, whether they drop down to a 25 or they just pause to see whether they've done enough once the inflation peaks, they believe, at the end of the year. So interesting times, but we've been here before. I've had mortgage rates of 7.5%, 8%. We've always said to people, always work on, between that 6 to 7% as a retail rate. I don't think they'll get as high this time around. And I'm not sure whether the RBA is forced to go above what they call the neutral rate. I'm not really sure we're going to stay there for a long period of time. And most economists, hold that view that once we feel comfortable about inflation being sort of now behind us in terms of that headiness of that supply shock inflation, and we can control the demand-led inflation, we will start to see potentially, 25 or 50 basis points off that to bring us down to that neutral rate. So if you're thinking medium term, cash rate around 2.5, normally there's a margin of around 2% on that. So you're talking about maybe long-term variable interest rates around that 4.5, 4.75 is probably where you want to be thinking from a household in terms of doing your budgets over the medium term.
And Ben, I think it's something to remember too in the next few days. Some of the way, if you are suffering a little bit of anxiety around this, the best way to do it, and it sounds tongue in cheek, but I do mean it, is just switch the news off, because they are recycling headline stories that are inducing part of the anxiety. So wherever there's noise, go to the facts. Go back to your budget, have a look to see what your buffers are, and see if it's genuinely affecting you. That's one thing, but for the majority of people, it will only affect them as a monster under the bed. It won't actually affect them. I think that's important.
And I think you've got to know your numbers, right? So where you find comfort is making the invisible visible. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, this is definitely self-indulgent, but we have a platform. It's called More, which is basically moorr.com.au. Jump on there. There's a money stretch feature in there. You can put your numbers in there. You've got money smarts in there as well. And you can actually model the impact on that. Now, it's a good segue, Bryce, because Pocketbook, which is, one of Australia's most popular mobile apps and money apps, is basically being turned off this week, right? Mm. So from that point of view, why not try that? And our mobile version's not far away. We're in testing on that mobile version as well. So yes, we're web-based at the moment, but our mobile version is imminent. So hopefully we'll have that out in the next month or so. And so you can then start to, use that as your tool in terms of how you check in on your money. So we're really passionate about simple things, which is how you organize your finances, how you feel in control of those, because the mindset thing, we do enough work on this podcast around mindset and focus on that to make that. And then, as Bryce says, lift your eyes to the long term. And we're going to be talking a bit more about that as well today.
Because Ben, the reality is that I don't like that my expenses have gone up. I don't, right? No. But it's not causing me panic, because I have a buffer and a margin in place. I've had that for some time, and I've had all of my assumptions around a higher interest rates than what we are. So I've had a paradigm of seeing the interest rate environment that we've experienced for the last 24 to 30 months. I've seen that as a bonus rather than an expectation and an entitlement. So we've known that it's coming for some time, but sometimes because as you know, I'm largely out of the news cycle, Ben, but sometimes I do catch it, and it's easy to get on that anxiety train pretty quickly.
No one's immune to it, Bryce. I mean, it's a natural instinct. We have, in our biology, we have an instinct of flight or fight, right?
Yes.
And so if you're thinking, well, why do I feel uneasy about this? Trust me, Bryce and I have those fleeting moments. Mm. What we've been able to do over the multiple recessions and the generations of property cycles that we've been through is we just let it pass, and then we come back to the fundamentals. I actually, had to do an exercise recently. We're settling on a property next week, and that's exactly, I needed to, line my ducks up and have a look at all of the, the numbers again. And it was a good exercise. It was cathartic because it also reminded me of, actually, it's a pretty good position that I find the family in. I've got private school fees about to start. I've got all of these other things that are happening. So it wasn't a bad exercise to be able to do that. Now, for those people whose budgets are tight, and what is interesting, Bryce, if I can take a little side segue here just quickly, is you remember I was telling you about that the cash rate was roughly where it was before the pandemic hit, and then we got these huge drops in terms of cash rate reductions and so forth. A lot of repayments stayed where they were. So this is actually, this increase and potentially the next increase is actually the first time households are actually going to see that increase, because they've been paying those repayments and just been benefiting from the fact that they're paying more principal and interest over that time. So it'll start to show up again in retail sales over the course of the next quarter. And I think that's an important message here. But if you do, what we don't want people to do is, if money is tight, you can't put your head in the sand and just think, I just want to wish this away. That's not what we're saying. What we are saying is, do the exercise on what's essential and discretionary, and we have that feature inside the platform where you can then start to look at your money, and then we've got money stretch in there as well, which is all free to use. And so do that, get some confidence, and then not listen to the noise, because once we start seeing that cash rate go down to a 25 or be flat and a pause, you watch what consumer confidence and consumer sentiment will do. It'll be like, oh, the world's not caving in, which is exactly what happened after the pandemic. The world's not caving in. Yes, it was, very fearful. We didn't know how deadly it was going to, there was a lot of uncertainty. So once we get through the bit of uncertainty that we're going through over the next month or two, I'm really confident about more broadly where unemployment is and where business confidence is at. And so I see, good growth, but I do see that slowing, I should say. This is a manufactured slowdown, which is required.
And Ben, money fit too. So you mentioned stretch and smarts, but where fit comes into this is gives people an opportunity to look at peek over the fence, right? Because we actually want to go, well, okay, if we're all doing essential and discretionary as you describe, actually, how do I compare to people in the same state, demographic, age bracket?
So household composition and state, that's right. Or you can compare yourself across the nation, even across all the different expense items. So you can do it at income, you can do it at total expenditure. But you can also say, well, what do we spend on groceries compared to a like household in the same state? All anonymized data. It's all, there's no personal.
Doesn't help me, Ben, see what other people spend on groceries, because because I go to Andrew and she goes, so I have to remind you how much we pay for a loaf of bread. So it's all right.
The gluten-free piece. Yeah, no, look, and that's where you've got to say, put it into context in terms of where you can make some savings. And that is just about asking yourself the question, okay, is there excess in what we're doing at the moment? And maybe, tapering that in. And when you do taper that in, that's when inflationary pressures start to slow down, because it's not demand side, and businesses can't push prices higher because of that. And so the whole thing slows down. The machine of the economy slows down. And again, it's a manufactured slowdown. And then what you've got to be making sure of is you don't overcook that, where you basically destroy confidence and you bring panic into the market, because that's when it becomes quite messy and the recovery cycle is longer. So the RBA and the board know that they're trying to land the plane, and it's bouncing around a little bit as it's coming into land. And then hopefully they can really just do a touch and then take off again. And look, a couple of other big things that would also help out globally is if Russia and Ukraine find a ceasefire or a settlement arrangement there. That would be phenomenal for both food prices globally and also for oil and energy prices. So that will take supply shock, inflation out of the system. And then same with China, if they can work out a sensible way in which they can keep their economy open, given the amount of goods that are being because that led obviously to a shipping and transport bottlenecks and all of those other things. So we're starting to see those supply chain shocks come out of the data, which is a good sign, because everyone's trying to slow their economies.
Yeah, to your earlier point, Ben, use the energy that you could have into anxiety towards checking each of your line items. I think that's where your energy would be better spent, to see what you can get back, and then that can help absorb some of those extra costs. So, folks, we get that some people are really negatively affected by that, but from our research and from the experts that we talk to, within the data sets that matter around mortgage stress and the like, the majority of people aren't going to have any sort of major negative effects to their household, other than tightening the belt on a few things. So if you've planned for it, if you've seen it at a higher rate, if you've seen it as a bit of a bonanza, well, then that's helpful. But folks, just protect yourself in the coming days for the headlines that are inevitably coming, and it's going to go up again next month. So just be wary of that. Hey, we're going to talk today, Ben, about something that's close to my heart around how a buyer's agent might be able to help in times like this. I'll talk to that in a second, but before we get there, my Mindset Minute theme is a Big Mac doesn't cost you $3.99, it costs you your health. Social media isn't free, it costs you your focus. Netflix doesn't cost $16.99, it costs you your time. So the best math that you can learn is how to calculate the future costs of your current decisions. And not all future costs are measured in dollars and cents either, because there's costs in time, there's costs of relationships, there's costs of stress and anxiety, there's opportunity costs. So I found that interesting as I was doing research to see that as a context, because we've got to ask ourselves, have we accurately considered all the costs of our decisions? And not all costs are measured in price. Because I see people make decisions about certain things, but they've only really got one side of the equation. They haven't thought of the other side of the equation. What are the unintended consequences? What are the unintended flow-ons that happen from some of the decisions we make? So I use that as a segue into the conversation that we're going to have today, Ben, about why would you consider using a buyer's agent now that the market has turned? And so in the context of unintended consequences and what does that look like, we're going to spend the next couple of episodes exploring that. But I figured I might just get in nice and early, Ben, and I guess declare my bias. I am a buyer's agent, tick. I have 2 television shows where I am a buyer's agent on the show, Ben, tick. I've led a group of high-performing buyer's agents for well over a decade, and I now have the privilege of doing that with an exceptional leader in Jess. So, tick. I have a business that has buyer's agency within it. So I have a massive confirmation bias here, right? So what I want to say to you as a disclaimer is you should listen to this with a healthy dose of skepticism. Yep. Because if I'm a barber and you walk in and you ask me for a haircut and I say yes, you can sort of take that in 2 ways. So I just want to say that you and I are going to present the facts as we see it in the context of what a buyer's agent does, how they can add value, what they do for the client over time. And then you can see if there's any value and you can discard anything that you think is part of my confirmation bias. So I thought it's important for us to set that up, Ben, because I'm sure people will get in first if I don't. That that makes sense because you're a buyer's agent. So here we go. We're going to talk about it and we're going to give you some facts. And stick around because next week we're going to talk to a previous winter series guest and get an update on their portfolio, Ben, and see where they're at and see how they've added another property to the portfolio, which is super exciting. So and I guess stick around to the end of today as well, because we're going to give you our top 3 reasons why you should consider using a buyer's agent in the current environment. Interest rate rises, everything that's going on. So stick around for that. But I think it's always good just to set the scene on for those people who don't know what a buyer's agent is, or they've got this vague idea of what a buyer's agent is. It's pretty simple. They're a licensed professional who represents the interest of a buyer in a real estate transaction. Mm-hmm. That's it. Now, I can give you heaps of layers and heaps of detail, but that's essentially it. It's someone who represents the buyer in a real estate transaction, because most people are familiar with a real estate agent who represents the interests of a seller. So it's kind of just the mirror.
Sometimes I refer to them as advocates, and sometimes people say I'm a buyer's advocate because I advocate on behalf of the buyer. But a buyer, as you said, right, really clean definition, Bryce.
So I guess hopefully that helps people get the context. So if you've got someone representing you as the buyer, that is part of the insight in today's conversation, because as the buyer, just because the market has changed doesn't mean you need any less representation. And in some cases, you probably need more because of what you need to navigate. So we'll go through that. But what do? All right, it's pretty simple. Number 1, they understand what you're looking to buy. So a good buyer's agent will get to know their client. They'll get to know what they're looking for. They'll get to know what their pain points are, and they'll get to look at possible ways that they can help with those pain points. So they've got to understand what you're looking to buy. Secondly, they'll go and search for the property. Then that's on market, off market, advanced market. So 3, they'll go and evaluate those properties. And this is where, and we might pause on this one, Ben, but this is where there is a lot of discrepancy between buyer's agents, because someone who's been a buyer's agent for 5 minutes versus someone who's been a buyer's agent for some time, seen lots of properties, lots of property types, lots of cycles, lots of states, lots of different properties within. That's a real skill. So I think we might pause and reflect on this point here, Ben, and see what you want to add at this point. But that evaluation is something that is the same as when you go to an advanced surgeon who walks in, puts the gloves on, does their magic and walks away. Well, it's all of the body of work that is sometimes referred to as the 10,000 hours that allows them to do that tweak in a small amount of time. So your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I like the medical analogy, Bryce, because right now I'm struggling with an eye injury or an eye issue. and I went and saw a surgeon. I'll have to get an operation on my eye. And his diagnosis was, in the 10 years of being a surgeon, he's only seen 3 examples of this. Right. But I'm glad he's seen 3 examples of it, right? Because, if he hadn't seen any examples of it, I got a lot of confidence out of his confidence. He was basically talking to me with someone like, there's nothing wrong with the retina. I can't see any issues there. You never know. But I'm really confident about that. Looks like this is what's happening, and it's torn this area here, and that's why you've got bleeding in your eye, blah, 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 blah. So I think from that point of view, that's exactly that. Now, if I put that into the property search context, the thing that I'm looking for in a buyer's agent is their confidence in a couple of areas around how they're talking to me, how their knowledge of the area, their research that they've done, the data that's supporting that in terms of the demand and supply data, and then how they're the comparable properties. I think if you asked anyone on the street what's their biggest fear about property buying, is paying too much. Yeah. And not working out how to estimate value. And evaluations are very subjective, because at the end of the day, no 2 properties are the same. So they're the sort of clues I'm looking for in terms of how a buyer's agent's experience resonates with me in terms of when they're talking to me about, I've been here before, this is not my first rodeo, and how they're using that information to not only talk to me, but how they also negotiate and establish value.
Buyer's agency is exciting, Ben. It's I got to say, I don't do as many deals. The thrill of the hunt. I love what happens when you're competing to jockey for position, when you're talking to the agents, when you're doing negotiations, when you're steadying the client. I love every part of that, right? But it is something that we've used the analogy of the obstetrician before, where being a buyer's agent and hanging with me here, folks, because I know there's a hell of a lot of technical difference between an obstetrician and a buyer's agent. But an obstetrician delivers a baby at 3 a.m, at 12 at lunchtime, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. That's not done during office hours, and a buyer's agent does the same thing. Sometimes no 2 births are the same, or no 2 deals are the same, and but the thing is, if you're about to have a baby, which I never will, Ben, so I can't experience, but if my wife was having a baby, I think she wants to know that someone knows what they're doing.
Yes.
They don't want someone who's pretty excited about being an obstetrician, but is having their first swing, because that would be distressing. So I guess that's the bit here when we get to what a buyer's agent does and they evaluate properties. That is only happens with time. The amount of people that come on this podcast, Ben, or write to us because of this podcast and say, I love what you guys do. I want to be a buyer's agent. I'm over here in this unrelated industry, and I'd love to come in and be in your industry. And I just say to them, there's no substitute from getting your runs up. You just got to do your time.
That's right. And if you're training to become one, how long have you been shadowing a great buyer's agent? Same sort of thing in terms of selling agents, same sort of thing. How did you learn your craft? Well, I shadowed for a year or 2 in terms of the best people, and I've taken all of that, or I've got the sum of the parts of everyone, and we discuss every purchase and every deal. Like, I'm learning so much about teamwork and how I bring that together. So, if you don't, because we all start as beginners in anything that we do, and then we build up that level of knowledge and level of experience. And once we combine all that, we become, quite capable in our craft.
And then you think about when all that energy comes together. So if you even think about our team, Ben, we've got someone who's been doing real estate for 30 years, a large part of that on the selling side. And then we've got others in the team who have been on the renovation side. And we've got others in the team who have actually incredible at the detail and the research. And then as they get to bring that all together as a group, that helps only, the 1 and 1 + 1 = 5. It's this amplification that comes from that. So folks, the reason I paused on this third part here around the evaluation is because this is incredibly important, and it is something that experience really does. And Ben, there's a bunch of buyers agents who have come into the industry who have perfect agenda. They want to help people, but they just don't have those runs on the board. So being able to evaluate makes it difficult. So what do? They understand what you're looking to buy. They search for these properties. They evaluate the properties. Then they recommend which ones to inspect. because part of that is going, well, you'll see later that saving time is part of the issue here. So if there's 20 properties that we've seen, we might only suggest even focusing energy on 2, right? Or 1, or in some cases, don't focus any energy on any, because none of them are investment grade or none of them are worth pursuing. So they recommend 4, they recommend which ones to respect. Number 5, they secure the property. Auction, private treaty, jockeying for position, getting events. Like there's a whole range of stuff even on that point alone. Number 6, this one here, Ben, is I think sometimes the difference between a good buyer's agent and a bad one, and that's someone who can ensure a smooth settlement.
Yep.
And the way that buyer's agents get paid is they get paid on results. They get paid on success. If they help someone engage in a transaction, they get paid. If they don't help someone, they don't. And quite often what can happen is get the transaction done, and then just by nature of what they got to do, they've got to go and talk to some more people. Because as a buyer's agent, you've got to be good at 2 things, Ben. The first thing is you've got to be good at your craft. And the second thing is you've got to go and find people to be good at your craft for. And it's that second one that people often underestimate how hard that is to do, right? Yeah. So if you're putting a deal together and then done, then all of a sudden you've got to change frames and go, all right, I've got to go over here and I've got to find another person to serve. Takes a different mindset, a different frame, a different skills, different words that come out of your mouth. And it means you've got to go and put some energy over there. And meanwhile, the person that you've helped has to get through to settlement. And just because you got the contract done, there's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be done to get you to a smooth settlement. Because, Ben, I don't know how many of you can remember that went through absolutely perfectly smoothly without a single interruption, but they are few and far between. A lot of them go through smoothly, but generally speaking, there's a troubleshooting of some sort that happens.
There's a lot of moving parts in a transaction that moves to settlement. There's disbursements, there's calculations, there's selling banks involved, there's buying banks involved, there's a lot of people involved. And so coordinating that is getting a little bit easier with technology, but very few do go through smoothly. So if your buyer's agents abandon you on that program because it's like, next, well, how much does that make you feel about the experience that you've just had with that buyer's agent? It's like, I don't need to find the next person that I'm going to serve. It's like, well, you haven't really finished serving that person. So getting them to sell. And, the other part about that is what's if they're an investment property, Bryce, I want post-care. Like I want, where's my tenant coming from? Who's my property manager? All of those other nuances, they're going to be part of that experience that I've invested in my trust in you to be able to deliver.
Yeah, so what you're referring to then is that 7th step, which is post-settlement advice. And some of it comes pre, but a lot of it comes post because you get the property manager. And we know there's 2 anxiety points. There's 2 big anxiety points in the whole transaction. It's the first one is the point where it's game on. Hey, listen, I've got a property. Let's get this done. And it's all of a sudden that's where the rubber meets the road for the first time. Hey, this is a big transaction. It's a lot of money. This is happening. Is this really happening? This is real, all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And then a buyer's agent will go, hey, listen, I know you'd love to take 2 weeks to consider it and debate the pros and cons and think about it, but you got to let me know in 90 minutes. Otherwise, we'll lose it. And so that does produce anxiety. So we, as a buyer's agent, we have a process that helps a client manage that anxiety and be prepared for that moment. But some buyer's agents might not have a process that does that. So that's the first one. The second bit of anxiety is where will I get a tenant? Will it be possible for me to get a tenant? And particularly if someone has been brave and bold and courageous and gone interstate, then that ramps up that anxiety even more. So being able to tap into a property manager, we're going to go into a lot of detail on this in next week's episode. But I guess really what we wanted to say is at a headline level, there is a bit of stuff going on here. So when you're buying, there's a few things for you to think about. A mate of mine I caught up with on Saturday, Ben, I've been encouraging. It's funny how, your family and your friends are the hardest people to convince on what you're doing. Like, what are you doing? I've been buying this. I've been doing this. Oh, yeah, sure. But then, like, none of my family comes and asks me for advice, Ben. And I do it for free, just if any of my family's listening. So, so it's
you might get a call now.
Yeah. Well, I've just sought peace in the fact that you can't be a prophet in your own village, right?
Yeah.
One of the properties I purchased early, I bought for 191,000. I just had it valued recently for 705. I asked my sister to buy in the same block, and she didn't, right? So there's an experience and lots of reasons why, right? So there's no problem, but none of my family is interested in engaging with me about property investment. So one of my mates, I finally convinced him, good income, has an opportunity in the sweet spot for buying. And then he said, depreciation schedule. I said, yep, this is who you should use. Now, anyone who's listening to this podcast knows we have a friendship with Bradley Beer from BMT, and we happen to think that they produce pretty good depreciation reports, right?
And our clients get a discount as part of that. But yes, we don't take anything. It's a professional introduction, but we know that they do great work, excellent service, and they get it done when we ask them to get it done.
Well, here's the deal. Not only our clients, Property Couch, there's a form. We'll put it in the show notes. We'll put it in the email that we send out to everyone. And by the way, if you're not on our database, if you haven't gone to the Property Couch and left your email address with us, we give out all the summary of each episode. We give out all the free. There's nothing that you need to do, Ben. We dish it up to you.
Yes.
So as a side note, if you're not on our community list, I'd certainly encourage you to go and jump on our community list so that we can give that. But we dish all this up. So we'll put that in the show notes and we'll put it in the communication tomorrow morning about that, so you can get a discount. So I'm digressing, right? So he comes up to me, he goes, mate, because at the time I said, look, they're not the cheapest, but it's the net difference we're after. So I know you can get a cheaper depreciation schedule, but just trust me on this, pay the extra. And I promise you, comes up to me and says, got my tax return back the other day. And it was 5 figures. I said, 5 figures. That's nice. That's not bad. And all of a sudden, you could just see the penny drop moment, right? So it's little conversations like that where he all of a sudden sees that big chunk of cash is now going on my offset account. And then that allows me to have confidence that I can cash flow this thing. And so from that conversation, we're having conversations around, all right, you're going again? He's going, maybe I should. And so it's those little cursory pieces of advice that you plug into the right people at the network at the right time that makes an extraordinary amount of difference. So again, and this is at 30,000 feet, right? Some buyers agents listening to me will go, you missed this bit and you missed this bit. Sure, I get it, right? But here's the 30,000 feet. Understand what they're looking to buy, 1. 2, they search for properties. 3, they evaluate them. 4, they recommend which ones to inspect. 5, they secure the property. 6, they ensure a smooth settlement. 7, they give post-settlement advice. And 8, well, in some cases, rinse and repeat them because this is a game of accumulation of assets.
That was a great experience. Yep. I got an awesome amount of value out of it. And at the end of the day, benefit is cost, so value is benefit over cost, right? That's exactly how it works.
I'm glad you said that, Ben, because I've been diving into benefit over cost and I've got another formula for you. And I think you'll appreciate this, right? But the benefit on the top of the line is your dream outcome and then the perceived likelihood of achievement. That's on the top end. And on the bottom end, is the cost is in time delay and the amount of effort and sacrifice that I've got to do. Yeah. And so really what a buyer's agent does is doubles down and dials in on the bottom end of that equation, right? Because the time and the effort and sacrifice is where the right qualified, independent, experienced buyer's agent will help you. And the closer you can get that to 0, the more infinite the benefit becomes, because you and I talk about the dream outcome. We've done that over 400 episodes, and we've showcased that it's worked for us and a whole bunch of our clients, right? So therefore, the perceived likelihood of achievement plus the dream outcome, but it's that bottom section where you try and reduce that bottom part of the cost equation as we expand it out to get that closer to 0. So folks, that is what they do at a big picture level. Ben, why would you use one?
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, why would I use one? They are experienced buyers, right? It's not their first rodeo. They know what they're doing. If they've bought multiple properties over the journey, that builds to their knowledge about how they deal with different people. I mean, at the end of the day, any type of real estate transaction involves people. It involves emotion. And there are different types of selling agents out there, some with tremendous egos, others with less ego and more heart, who want a great outcome. Everyone's looking for outcomes, as part of this transaction, and everyone's looking to be recognized as part of that. So I like this idea that if I'm going to be using one, I want to know roughly what their experience has been around buying, and potentially about, their knowledge of the area in terms of where they're buying as well.
So it gives it away in the name, Ben. They're buyers agents. They buy. They're professional buyers. And for most people, they buy on average one every 7 years, Ben. That's average. So some people will be listening to me going, gosh, I've done 3 in the last 3 years. And there'll be others going, nah, been in the same place for 25 years, haven't done that for a while.
Yeah.
So to give you a sense, we purchased 608 properties last financial year, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
I promise you it wasn't 608 properties we had a swing at, but let's just assume that's over 10.
Yes, there were hundreds that we missed.
Hundreds we missed, hundreds and hundreds that we saw, right?
Yeah.
So that's more than 10 a week.
And thousands that we assessed.
More than 1 a day. On average is more than 1 a day. So buyers agents buy, and they know what to do, right? So that's number 1. Number 2, I reckon you'd use one just because they're experienced negotiators. Now, just to give people insights, real estate agents, the good ones, practice negotiation. They do role play. They do role play with their peers. They do role play within their office. They do role plays with their mentors. They look at different ideas. They think of every possible objection that is going to come up for you as to why you can't proceed, as to why they can get more money out of you. They look for body language. They look for signs. We've talked about this a number of times. But if the real estate agent is a professional negotiator, which most of them are, some aren't, Ben, most of them are, if you don't have any negotiation experience, that's going to put you at a significant disadvantage. So buyers agents on the mirror do the same thing. They're practicing, they're learning, they're developing their craft. And one of the things that I love seeing in practice is when our team goes, hey, I've got this deal, let's have a swing. And they do a virtual whiteboard, they do an actual whiteboard, and it's like, well, what do you think? What would you do here? What would you do here? And they bring all different angles, and the team gets together and goes, have you thought about this? I know this person. I can get the intel here. I can do this. And that's a beautiful thing to see as people come together and collaborate and go, righto, we're at the white line here. We're in a battle. They're trying to do the best thing by their client, and we're trying to do the best thing by our client, and let's duke it out, and it's fun. And at the end of the negotiation, the good news is for 9 out of 10 transactions, we step across the line, we shake the hand of the real estate agent, we go, nice one, we'll see you on the next one, because it's just a professional duking experience that knows that once the deal's done, we talk to them, we say, we'll see you on the next one, which is nice. So the fact that buyers agents negotiate is something that's extraordinarily powerful. Ben, the next one.
Yeah, the next one is they remove emotion, Bryce. And so for me, there's a big lot of money, right? And people are connected to money through emotion. And so, we all, again, want to get the best possible outcome for our story and for, the lifestyle by design that we're trying to achieve. And so the idea here is that a good to great buyer's agent cares, but they care without that emotional content, right? They know when to tap out. They know when to say, you know what? I'm not sure. We need to step a bit further on this deal because I reckon that's at the top range of our value. And so let's be sensible here and tap out on this one, and let's find the next one that comes along. But on the other side of it is when it is getting emotional and there is you get that buyer's fear, and their job is to also calm that down, right? Because they're not experiencing the same emotion as the person who's cutting the check. So they can use that to their advantage in terms of, I care, but just not that much that I'm going to bring emotion into this conversation. This is a transaction, even for owner-occupiers, right? I get that it's, you can see yourself in this house and we will stretch to where we need to stretch to, but at some point in time, we've also got to bring a state of reality into play here as well. So I just love the fact that they keep a level head in terms of those difficult moments.
This is one of the most underrated ones, Ben, in terms of that emotion. If you've got a wonderful relationship with your buyer's agent, they will keep you calm.
Yep.
And I said in my Mindset Minute, some things aren't measured by price, Ben. They can be measured by the cost of stress and anxiety. That's a huge one.
Yeah.
So that's one was their experience. Two is their experienced buyers. One, two, their experienced negotiators. Two,
Yep.
Three, they remove the emotion. Number four is they save you time, and number five is they save you money. And I talked about that in the value equation. Fast beats free, Ben. Fast beats free. So being able to help people narrow that time frame and save their own time is something that is enormously powerful. You just think about what you have to do just to get it into first gear to do a transaction, Ben. Everyone just thinks, oh, I'm going to go and check out real estate. Far out. There is a fair bit upstream on that, which we'll dive into a bit more next week as well. But then save you money. Most people sort of want you to save your money in obvious ways. I think a lot of the time the buyer's agent saves you money in less obvious ways. And it's because they help you overcome procrastination. They help you make sure you don't pay too much. Because everyone goes, well, if you can negotiate the fee out of the price, of course I'd use you. And it's like, well, that's not always the case. Sometimes that happens. But it's not always the case. And if you set yourself up as a buyer's agent that I will always negotiate my fee out of the price, you are in for a short-lived career, because a lot of the times you just can't do that, Ben. But what you can do is save opportunity cost, what you would have paid, what you would have missed, what asset you would have bought. You'll only know that in 10 years' time. And again, it comes
the
back
asset
to
that I discovered off market that you wouldn't have even known about, or pre-market or advanced market, whatever that looks like. That's the multitude of ways in which time and money, is in your favor. So there's real value in that story. We're
going to go a lot deeper into that next week as well, just to give you some stuff on the ground. We're going to use our own experience, Ben, experience of our clients, so that you can see what were the pain points that they were experiencing and how did that overcome, just to give you an insight from the coalface. Because we actually survey the clients, they give us feedback. And we ask them these three questions: what should we keep doing? What should we start doing? What should we stop doing? That gives us incredible intel around what was the pain point, how did we overcome the pain point, and what's some of the pain points that you're experiencing that we missed, so that we can sharpen up our system. So we'll do a bit more of that next week as well. Okay, so we've kind of set the scene, right? What is a BA? What do they do? Why would you use one? So let's have a look at the briefs, and really they come into a couple of broad categories, Ben.
Yeah, basically simple home buyer. When I say simple, I should probably not put that word in front of it. Home buying is a difficult brief, but it's because it's an emotional brief, right? The difficulty is to try and get all of the critical elements of what the buyer wants in the property, whether that's the second living area, whether that's the separation of the bedrooms from the entertaining areas, the noise areas, whether we can grow into a family. So that is, the home buyer brief comes in all shapes and sizes, from buying units right through to buying McMansions in the suburbs. So, that one can take you on what is, from a buyer's agent point of view, can be extremely rewarding, right? When it lands, it's just one of those emotional things. You've just made a massive impact in terms of the emotional comfort and the lifestyle and the memories that these people are going to create in the area. So that's the buyer's brief. In terms of the investor brief, it's a different story, right? I mean, ultimately, we've got two types of real estate. We've got residential, or we've got commercial/industrial. So that also has in itself some skill sets around what you will need to know and understand about how you determine value, how you look at the land to asset ratios, how you look at the yield ratios, how you look at all of those other types of things. But it's a different type of brief, right? Ultimately, the connection of emotion shouldn't be there. It's a business transaction. You're making a financial investment, you're assessing the risk, and you're hoping to get a medium to long-term return of that's justified your investment and your effort and your time.
To a couple of your points too, Ben, the home buyer, it is emotional. So when we said previously that we removed the emotion, you remove the emotion from the buying experience, but you can't remove the emotion out of the connection for the house. And quite often the house, the apartment, the townhouse, whatever it is. And so in terms of fee structure, usually home buyers get charged more as a buyer's agent than an investor, because It takes longer. Finding the right property is a smaller pack of properties, and navigating that as well. Because as a home buyer, one of the things, because I've done 2 television shows, Ben, that largely around home buying, and that's probably the majority of the time I do home buyers. I off camera, I prefer to do in investors. But quite often and this is the bit that I do enjoy about home buyers. It's the property counsellor that you become. Because quite often buyer 1 and buyer 2 don't have the same agenda. So it's really diving in, finding out the whys and the detail underneath that. And then getting the joy of bringing those 2 things together at the beginning, which ultimately comes into a professional prize of seeing them get their dream outcome, which is cool. But
love it.
Yeah, for most of what we talk about as a buyer's agent, it's definitely from the context of from that investor space, but a fair bit of what we talk about is for the home buyer space. But it's important to understand the types of briefs that we come across, and then there's the type of service, and there is a range. And I guess for some people they might be surprised, Ben, that it's more than just the full package. There's a couple of other options.
Yeah. I mean, the full service, which is the turnkey solution, that encompasses everything that we talked about earlier in terms of what they do. And what Bryce said, the full turnkey solution is some of that post-settlement, pre-settlement stuff that's also happening in there as well. So, they're doing the full gamut of what's going on. The other 2, in terms of negotiate only, that's sometimes where I've found the asset, but I'm so connected to it, or, I've got this sort of churning in my stomach, these butterflies that I don't know how well I'm going to react or act as part of the negotiating piece. So bring in the experts. This is where you can potentially bring in the experts, and they can do private treaty negotiations. They can do in boardroom negotiations. They can do auction bidding for you. I quite enjoy coming in and doing the auction bidding jobs from time to time over the journey as well. But that is a different fee in terms of what they're doing. They may be, depending on which buyer's agents you may see out there, some might have value-added extras in terms of an assessment of the value of the property. A lot of people might think that that's a given in some cases, but no. If in some cases it could be that their fee is cheaper because all they're doing is going to whack their hand up and try and intimidate on the auction day, and that's why they look cheaper. So you want to be really understanding what that negotiation only looks like, and if there's appraisal work that needs to be done, if there's connection with the agents prior to bidding, all of those types of things factor in time and cost. And so that's what you want to be thinking about from negotiation only. And then when you start to bring those types together, there's a hybrid opportunity, isn't there, Bryce?
There is. So some of the most time-consuming part of looking for a client brief is actually the inspections, going and seeing the properties. Got to get between this one, got to be in 2 different spots at one time, can't compete on diary. So quite often you can get a hybrid brief where someone will go and do the inspections, and then you can mentor them through the decisions and kind of leverage your 10,000 hours on behalf of someone else doing some of the legwork for you, which allows some people like to get hands-on. Quite often when we talk about a hybrid to clients and we say that means you got I don't want to do the property stuff. That's where the time consuming is. And we go, yep, that's exactly right. So you've got a spectrum. You've got full negotiate only. And for us, the negotiate only is in 2 parts. Part A is the property assessment, just to make sure you're in the game. Because some people might say, I want to be in this property. This is my budget. We'll go and assess, and we'll go, you don't have a snowflake's chance in hell of getting that, because that price guide has suckered you in. But the actual reality of the market is, here's one that sold for this, here's one sold for this, and here's one sold for this, and this is why yours compares. So therefore, I don't think we should proceed because you're well out of the game. That's part A. And then part B is, okay, on the day, there's some gamesmanship, there's some, and that part A takes a lot of time, by the way. Takes a lot of time.
That's where the time is.
Yeah. In fact, doing comparable analysis for a property, because we had Greville Pabst on many moons ago. He said you compare apples for apples and you adjust for the bruises. that sounds good at a headline level, but adjusting for the bruises is actually harder than you'd think, because no two properties are the same. So that comp work takes a lot of time. Then obviously you get up on there on game day and you'll either negotiate with the agent in private treaty scenario, or you'll turn up at auction and you'll have a swing and bid away. And there's a whole bunch of tactics that come from that, which we'll talk about as well. So kind of three broad types of service that you can experience with the buyer's agent. Now, folks, hang around, because we're getting pretty close to revealing why we think there's our top three reasons for why you should use a BA. But before we get there, three important things to consider. And this is super important, right?
Mm-hmm.
Number one, independence. Do you have someone representing you exclusively, which is what you should have, or is there dual representation? So I'll give you an example of that. Quite often within a real estate business, Ben, they have what's called an EBU, an effective business unit. So for the listing agent to get something done, to get the volume of deals that they want to get done in a year, they've set their own goals. They reverse engineer how many houses they've got to sell to be able to do that. They've got to bring on a team, and they break up their team, and the listing agent does all the work with the agent. They do the negotiations, they do all the liaising, they build the relationship. Then they have another person in their team who looks after all the, in the industry, it's called non-dollar productive work, where you go and get all the contracts and the admins and all those things that move it through settlement. And then the third group in that EBU, Ben, if they can afford to put in that EBU, is the person who does the buy work. So the people who come to the opens, they work through the list, they help them buy. And generally speaking, that person is paid by the listing agent. Therefore, they've got this tag as a buyer's agent, but they're not, Ben, because they're actually representing the seller and the buyer. And when push comes to shove, they're actually representing the seller. So that's super important.
Yeah, and that's one of the examples. The other example that's common where they try and hijack the buyer's agency name is when they're project marketing, or they're selling preset development stock, but they're not getting paid by, so that independence is lost, because how they're getting paid is through that selling of the project market, or the stock list selling, and they're masquerading as buyer's agents. But in reality, they're working as a selling agent, and they'll earn a commission on behalf of the builder or developer.
Yes, Ben, I say I've been a buyer's agent since 1998. So that's now, what am I, into my 24th year? But the reality is I've only been a buyer's agent since 2006.
Yeah.
Because the first 8 years I was a project marketer.
Yep.
So I was getting paid by the seller whilst helping buyers. So, and I've documented that a fair bit along the journey.
Yes.
But since 2006, I've loved representing the buyer. So I said three important things to consider. Number one is independence. Number two is having to think about fee structure. So there's typically a flat fee, and then there's a percentage of purchase price. Now, most buyer's agents, in my experience, Ben, do a percentage of purchase price, because it's kind of industry standard. Whereas we, as a business, have chosen flat fee.
Yep.
Yeah, the reason we've done that is really simple, because
the other selling side, Bryce, that's how the origins of this has evolved from a selling agent side, and they've always been a percentage of the price, because they're trying to get it higher, aren't they?
And it makes sense, Ben, because if we flow through to your point there, let's say you've listed your house for $700,000, and you're paying the real estate agent 2% plus GST, so you got 2.2% of the purchase price. You're paying them as a fee, and they said they'll get you $700. If you get them $770 and you were only expecting $700, you're happy to get $70,000 less their fee, because you weren't expecting it. So it kind of incentivizes everyone the same way. Whereas on the flip side, as the buyer, there's always a little niggle in the back of your mind. Is this person asking me to spend more because they'll earn more? Or is they asking me to spend more because that's what it's got to take to get the property? Whereas if you have a flat fee, it takes that out of the conversation. So
fixed cost.
Even when we do a home buyer brief, Ben, we don't do a percentage. We have a fixed quoted fee for a particular price range, so that people have that comfort around that. So flat fee versus percentage. So that's something that you need to be aware of. And secondly, are they independent advice? So when they make referrals, when we make a referral to the previous example, to BMT, Ben, how much commission do you and I get for that? Zero. In fact, there's a discount to Property Couch listeners that ordinarily might be getting paid as a referral fee. Brad doesn't do referral fees, just for the record, but there's a discount that we've said, well, here's some volume, and that helps, so you can get that. So legal representatives could pay referral fees. Building and pest people could pay referral fees. Mortgage brokers could pay referral fees. So you need to be super clear on whether or not your buyer's agent is getting clean income straight working for you and no other referral services. Because we've actually heard stories, Ben, where the buyer's agent, the independent buyer's agent, who's charging their client a fee to be independent, is getting paid by the sales agent to buy the property the sales agent is buying. That is the ultimate betrayal in my view.
That is the perfect definition of a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
In its purest form. I mean, I remember a particular deal that we put together in Sydney. And then I got a company, I was referred to a company that did the project management of the renovation on this Bondi apartment. And all of a sudden I get this $3,000 check arrive because apparently that project management team and sort of do the renos, they provide a referral fee. So I just quickly rang up the client. I said, "Hey, Rick, there's $3,000 coming into your bank account, mate. Apparently, they offer referral fees. I knew nothing about it, so apologies. I would have fully disclosed it first, but I would have also told them thanks, but no thanks. Just take it off the cost of the deal." So there you go. So there's some examples.
So number one, you need independence working exclusively for you. Number two, have a sense of the fee structure and also any side relationship fee structures that you should be aware of. And number three, they need to be licensed, Ben. In this country, you can't be a buyer's agent unless you operate under a license or unless you're licensed. And you and I are fully licensed. We've got other people in the business that are licensed, that allows us to be able to buy across borders because of that. But without those licenses, you are breaking the law.
You are breaking the law. So if you are a property coach, and I'm doing inverted commas there on an audio podcast, there is this grey area that people operate in as educators and coaches and so forth, and they're putting strategies together. So similar to our property planning team in terms of their, when they put a plan together, there's no recommendation of a particular property because if a fee is received, whether it be directly from the customer or a referral or kickback and so forth, you're in breach of Real Estate Agent Licensing Act right across the country. So it's really important that when you are working with a bona fide real estate agent, that they are an authorised rep or a licensee or attached to a licensee, similar to the way in which financial planners work. They operate as an authorised representative or they operate under their own financial services license. Same rules apply. So, but there is this grey area in direct property that there are some people who moonlight because they're getting paid commissions or they're getting paid and they're making recommendations on properties and negotiating on behalf of clients on properties, and they are breaking the law. So try and avoid those people where you can.
So they're your three important things to consider, folks: independence, fee structure, and license. So, all right, Ben, we're going to pivot now. There's three reasons, our top three reasons, why you should consider using a buyer's agent now in the current environment. So why did we go through all of that backstory today? And why are we going to dive a bit deeper next week and bring in someone who's just experienced a purchase of their own and all of the cut and thrust of being in the market and get to hear straight from their mouth? Why are we going to do that this week and next week? Well, it comes to this, right? And go back to my disclaimer I said at the beginning of the podcast, Ben, that still applies right now. So maybe take this with a grain of salt. But here we go. The top three reasons why we think that you should consider using a buyer's agent right now is because, number one, the herd is nervous. The herd is nervous. So fair weather buyers have left and motivated buyers are still cautious. So the competition is lower. And I think why the herd is nervous is one of the reasons why you should buy, is because if, there's times when, you and I, it wasn't that long ago, we did a three-part series, Ben, on how to buy when the market's hot, right? So the market's not that right now.
No.
And so, but back then everyone would have gone, geez, I wish the competition wasn't so strong. Wish I could get these really great assets, because you and I have spent a career and a portfolio across this podcast, trying to get people to understand the number one factor is action is the game here. You've got to get action, and you've got to buy the right assets, and you've got to hold them for long enough, right? So now you're presented with an opportunity where competition is lower, and people are going, "Nah, I don't want to proceed." Whereas I declared it last week. You and I talked before. I have gone and refinanced just so I can get myself into the market right now because I see an opportunity, right? But it's because I've got a whole bunch of other ducks lined up that's making me not nervous. But the fact that the herd is nervous is the reason why I'm trying to get back in.
Now, so if we put this into fundamental economic terms, Bryce, so I'm using economic theory here, but what we understand about the law of demand is as the law of demand gets stronger, the value or the price point, the supply, the value goes up, right? So it costs more if there's more demand in the market. Mm-hmm. Now, what's not unique about property, but what's interesting about human behavior with property is and this is why I love that herd mentality idea, is what happens in property is when others and the demand is lifting and others are also trying to compete, we have this term called FOMO, fear of missing out. Yes. So not only do you get this demand lift, you also get price lift, which increases demand because people have this fear of missing out. And that's what creates these property cycles and also potentially runs the risk of, people getting too over enthusiastic in particular markets. And that's why we see corrections in particular markets over time. But that is an important thing to understand. But I overlay this whole story, Bryce, and if I go back to when I was 20 and 21 and I was a novice and I was reading as much information as I could get my hands on and I was doing all this type of stuff, it still took me a decade because I was a nervous investor. I was nervous around my money. It's taken me a long time with my 10,000 hours plus of being confident and building our money. But the wealthy people leave clues, Bryce. Mm. They leave clues in the sense that they think medium to longer term. I mean, we've been talking about Warren Buffett recently in terms of everyone saying, oh, he's missing the next wave. He's missing the crypto wave. He's not the greatest investor of all. He is the greatest investor of all time because what he thinks is different and how he acts is different. And I always remember seeing these people getting up on stages like, why is there 5% of the population retire wealthy and the rest of the people don't? It's because they actually thought different to the masses. They didn't respond like the herd responds. They actually come outside of that. And it is fascinating, Bryce. I mean, we're seeing people in our business who we've been dealing with for, 2 or 3 purchases. They're actually proactively coming to us and going, should I go again? So they've worked it out. They've absolutely worked it out that this is a good time for them, right? So be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful. So it's going to, we're talking about the next few months is going to be, times where things are really difficult. But one thing about this concept here, Bryce, is coming back to the law of demand and supply here and with property, the moment that demand starts to spike, it can turn on a knife, right? It can turn on an edge really quickly because you're going out and doing inspections and you're going out and doing auctions and no one's bidding and everyone's got their hands in their pockets and nothing's happening. And then one weekend you're going out and say, okay, this one, I quite like this one. The good properties are still selling well. We know that feedback is still coming in. So there's still multiple buyers on the A grade properties. The second tier properties, everyone's got their hands in their pockets and everyone's waiting for someone else to act. Owner occupiers are sitting back waiting to act. In the first home buyers market, they're sitting back waiting to act. Everyone's looking for a bargain. But this is how quickly it turns. It can turn in 2 to 3 weeks. It can turn because all of a sudden now, like, actually, I do like this property, so I'm going to put my hand up, and that other couple also like, and then next week, and they're bidding on the same properties as I'm bidding on, and that's it. It just turns so quickly. Like if you look at how quickly it turned when everyone found out that the pandemic was okay, or how quickly it turned after the GFC, all of those things were really true in our big capital cities, Melbourne and Sydney. It's because it's all predominantly auctions in those sort of more affluent and sort of higher land value areas. It can turn so quickly. So if you think that you can time the market, well, you're better bet because, using that same example, on $1 million purchase, valuations on the day can turn $80,000 or $100,000 in a period of weekends, because it's like, well, I know that the property was worth that much because, it's off 5% from where the peaks were in that suburb. So I've done my research. But the moment that you get 2 or 3 competitive bidders, and everyone knows that the world isn't going to collapse, and we're not going to have a severe downturn, an economic downturn. We've got strong unemployment, we've got record savings, all of those things. Once that RBA stuff starts to happen, I suspect there will be a little bit of less nerves and a little bit more action. So if you think you can pick that, good luck to you. Or I love what Bryce said a couple of weeks ago. He says, I really like buying great properties under less competition. And I thought that sums it up beautifully, mate, in terms of what you said.
Well, I'm trying to do that now, Ben. I'm trying to find a great property where in a big market, the size of the land and the location that I'm trying to buy it in, under competition would be difficult, right? So I'm trying to be opportunistic to make sure I get those assets, because if there's anything that we've been trying to teach everyone on this podcast, Ben, is to lift their eyes. You said Warren Buffett is the greatest of all time. The greatest of all time.
Yeah.
Time is in there.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
So we're trying to buy the best assets we can and hold them for a long time. And so if I can actually buy great assets now when the competition is lower, that is why I'm doing it. So folks, the herd is nervous. And for all the reasons that we talked about earlier, and all the reasons we're going to go into a much deeper dive next week, there's a bunch of reasons why I think the price of a buyer's agent is dwarfed by the value that a buyer's agent provides you in this time. So we'll see that next week.
And Bryce, if I can just finish on this point with one important message. You go and sample friends and family, and you ask them this question about whether it's a good time to buy. You should expect 80+% of them to say, no way. What are you doing? You're crazy. This is what we're talking about in terms of herd mentality. They will talk you out of it. Yeah. But if you lift your eyes and you look at the next decade and the decade after and the decade after that, you would have made that great decision, in terms of, taking that opportunity when it presented itself. What's the biggest bit of feedback we get back about people who have built their portfolio? I wish I started earlier. Yeah. I wish I started when I could have started. So do expect that level of skepticism in the marketplace, and the media are going to tell you that it's not a good idea. That's when you start to think it is a good idea, because the opposite is true. When the cab drivers start to give you share tips, right? When everyone's starting to talk about crypto, this is the whole point. You missed it, right? Yeah. You missed it. You missed that timing opportunity in terms of that. So I just want that to land, because you are swimming against the tide, okay? And expect to have that concern and that emotional reaction that we talked about earlier in the pod around, like that moment of, oh, really? Am I doing the right thing? Expect to have a bit of that, but then pass through it, because the great ones do, and they are rewarded in spades over the next decade or two.
And Ben, for the critics of us that say you guys are always property preachers, that's fine, because we are always saying it's a good time to buy property, but we always give a caveat. If your job's secure, you've got cash flow buffers in place. If your time horizon is longer than 12 months, we say it's always a good opportunity to be buying, and we will continue to say that going forward, because the biggest thing that we observe, Ben, is people don't take action.
No,
they listen to what we say and they don't take action. So waiting for the right time. And so what we're saying for those people is, if you're one of those people that have been waiting to take action, waiting for the right time, the herd's nervous. Might be time to have a swing. So number one, top 3 reasons why you should consider using BA now is because you need help when the herd is nervous. You need guidance and support and mentorship, and you need to know what the pathway is, and you need to know how to navigate it. It's number 1. Number 2, Ben, the war chest is getting raided. What does that mean?
What it effectively means, and we talked about this maybe sort of 6 or 8 weeks ago when we really started to highlight this to everyone. The smart money is on getting liquid during this time. So we've been talking about that for the last 3 or 4 months. So this is where you get your properties valued. You get liquid in terms of tapping up your equity positions. So you're in a position to strike, exactly like what Bryce has done himself personally. Because what's actually happening is, for every incremental increase in the cash rate, that is adjusted for in terms of serviceability. So if the cash rate is currently at 1.85 and is moving to 2.5 to 3, then we're talking about further deterioration in terms of your borrowing capacity. So be aware of that in terms of that. And so by getting in earlier, it means you will have some of that borrowing capacity. I do expect, Bryce, also that APRA, sensibly will do something about dropping their floor rate minimum requirements as rates get back to more normalised levels. They implemented a conservative floor rate assessment from 2% to 3%, and that obviously restricted borrowing power when interest rates went to emergency levels like we've seen over the last couple of years. So as we come back to more normalised level rates, I do expect to hear something from APRA explaining to the banks, and that is going to allow for a little bit more borrowing power to kick in as well. So, but be mindful that if that does come in now, because we're back to when it was originally set, that's going to boost your borrowing power for this short period of time. But as we see more and more of these interest rate rises, that's going to start to, again, sort of tap away at that. And that's when you're going to miss out on potentially getting that $750,000 better location asset, as opposed to, having to settle maybe for a 600, which still over the long term is going to do all right. But remember, we do compounding return on the higher asset value is where you make your bickies. So from that point of view, we always say to people, if you can buy the best asset that you can at the price that you can afford, when you have confidence around your household economic situation and cash flows, then it's a good time to strike.
Yeah, so therefore the buyer's agent can help you through that mentorship, guidance, help you avoid procrastination, help you buy the right assets, which leads into our top three reason, Ben, and it is the mirage in the desert. Now, this is a point that I really want to drive home, because we are buying lots of properties. We have got foot soldiers everywhere across the country, so it's not like we're in this little concentrated pocket. It is happening all across the major markets that we're buying in. Good properties are incredibly hard to get your hands on. So like the mirage in the desert, Ben, there is a perception that people go, well, prices are dropping, therefore we'll just wait for them to drop further, and then we will just, I can promise you, and go and check it out for yourself, folks, just ask around. There is not a lot of great properties. So there's A's and B's and C's. There's not a lot of A's and B pluses in the market. And the ones that do, let me promise you, the buyers don't have all the power, Ben. Like if you in the peak it had 8 buyers, it might still have 2 or 3.
Yeah.
The problem is when there's competition, there's no heavy discounting when there's competition, because they just go, well, what are you going to pay? What are you going to pay? And let's just get you jerking it out. So for all the reasons that a buyer's agent can get you into position to jockey, to get the advanced listings, to have a relationship with the agents, there's a whole bunch of stuff, again, that we'll go into a lot of detail next week. Please know that the mirage in the desert is always a mirage. There is no water in that spot in the desert. It is just a reflection of the sun on some hot air, Ben, that makes it look like there's some water there. So I really want to drive this point home. Good properties are incredibly hard to get your hands on.
Got an example, Bryce, of this past weekend. Friends of ours were going for a property in a particular location, very high incomes, doctors, both of them, in terms of had the money to go, set the budgets on where they wanted to go to. Price range quoted 2.7, 2.9. Really easy family home, nothing to do, all beautifully renovated. Went for 3.125. Right, and that is in a supposedly difficult market of Melbourne. So again, the right properties with a strong owner-occupier appeal, those assets are always hard to find. Now, of course, that is not an investment-grade asset at 3 million, and beyond, the yields would be pretty ordinary in terms of being able to do that. But again, we're sort of coming back to this mindset of if your property's had a long-term return where it's had a 6 to 7% annual capitalized return, just keep thinking about that. The yield tops that up on top of it, and everything, is regression to the mean over the long term usually anyway. It's the land value that's going to appreciate over that time. So take that view that, look that decade, look that 2 decades, look that 3 decades. And, we are products of that mindset when we bought our properties at 23 and 2022, I think Bryce was. So, take that view, because over the longer term, it smooths itself out. You don't worry about this short-term volatility, and you take action. And a buyer's agent, again, they're not emotionally attached to that. This is like, I'm going to buy you the best asset. I'm going to go out and negotiate the hardest for you. And in this particular time, in a buyer's market, the ball is in our court more so than not. We can negotiate harder than we have been able to negotiate for the past couple of years.
Now, Ben, the other thing too is that real estate agents are not in a vacuum. They're not in some little closed off cone of silence. They also are experiencing all of the jitters and everything that's going on. So they're nervous about their commissions, right? So therefore, they will happily deal with a professional buyer who they know will fulfill. Because in a hot market, a real estate agent wants as many people as possible to see them, because that's how they get the next listing. Exposure, awareness, profile, performance, results, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in a quieter market, the agent starts to get a little bit more concerned about their own survival, their own income, their own listings, their own commissions, and all those sorts of things. So, and we've had, a buyer's agent has those built-up relationships. We get to cut through a lot of that stuff. So, all right, we set the scene, Ben. So we've kind of gone back to a bit of 101 today as to what they are, why you consider them, what they value to add. Then you and I have brought home our 3 reasons why you would consider using them right now. And we have a number of clients that are demonstrating that. So they've obviously put a lot of time and energy into their psychology and into the fact that action is the game here, not procrastination. So all those sorts of things. And as I said, next week I'm looking forward to it, Ben, because we're going to dive deeper into those 5 key ways that they can help you in terms of the experience, the negotiation, the emotion removing, the time and the money saving. So, and as I said, we're going to revisit a winter series guest, so stick around for that. But hopefully that's helped people remind themselves of a couple of things. Also some commentary for you and I, Ben, around anecdotally ourselves, what we're seeing, why you consider that, and what impact.
Well, we've done that full circle now for our community, haven't we, Bryce? So if you go back and listen to the episode where we're talking how to buy in a fast-moving market and the benefits and the pros and cons, now we've done it where it's actually a buyer's market, and now the advantages of that. So again, it's all
perceived buyer's market.
Yeah, perceived buyer's market. Yeah, because you're right. There's markets within markets, which we've been talking about as well. We still saw CoreLogic data show that Adelaide and Perth and Darwin property prices are still growing. So you wouldn't expect that given the media on the East Coast in terms of what's happening. So it's just a nice reminder that if you're thinking about educating yourself, they're the considerations that you'll want to be understanding. And now we've, again, completed that full circle in terms of the 30,000-foot view on what happens when a buyer's agent's competing in a very difficult, tough, challenging buying market, and now how they're also competing in the current market as well.
Very good. All right. So hopefully that's been insightful for you. Let us know in the comments on socials, write us an email, send us a speak pipe. We'd love to hear from you. And let me know if there was value in some of that detail as well. Hey, my life hack today, Ben, is I don't know how much YouTube you watch with the kids, but that's one of the favourite things that our kids like to do in their downtime. We give them a designated time. If someone's an expert, I'll probably do some crowdsourcing here, Ben. If someone is a parenting expert on electronics, maybe let me know, because I'd love to get some strategies and some advice, because I reckon I'm struggling.
All they think of is when's their next time on device.
I know.
Like it's just talk about the drug.
So shout out to anyone who's an expert. Ben and I would love some tips. But here's one of the things I've observed with the kids. You know how they just work stuff out really quickly? So I'm sitting there the other day and we're watching the top 50 marks in the AFL, because Samuel loves that. And the ads come on, I'm like, oh, and he just goes, click, 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 and then the ad's gone. And I went, what did you just do? And he goes, I just got rid of the ads. I said, they're just so annoying. I went, I didn't even know you could do that. How did you do that? And he goes, oh, Dad. And so I'm going to give everyone the little hack. So this works when you're watching it on a smart TV. I tried to do it on my phone and my tablet doesn't work, but when it's up on the big screen, what happens is when the ad comes up, what you do is you click up and there's a little tiny eye for information that appears just above the timeline on the bottom. I know this is really hard to demonstrate, so I'll do my best.
I understand what you're doing. Yeah.
So you just click up, and then say it's got 10 seconds. You can see the timeline that says the ad goes for 10 seconds. Just above that, there's a little eye, and you click on that eye, and then all of a sudden this pop-up on the right comes up and it says stop seeing this ad. You click on the stop seeing this ad, and then it says click return to video, and then all of a sudden it's gone. Now they do it at lightning speed, Ben. Like gone, and we're straight into it. Like it does take me a little longer than them, but I've now got a bit of a rhythm up. So I thought that might be a little life hack for anyone who's I love watching content on YouTube myself, Ben. I get some influencers that I love to watch, and that has been enormous. It means I can do the same thing as them. So click on the little eye.
Yep.
Then on the right, it has this super easy, right? If I can do it, anyone can do it. Click on the eye. On the right-hand side, it says stop seeing this ad. You click on stop seeing this ad. Then the next option says return to the video, and it's as if the ad hasn't appeared.
Ooh.
And so there we go. Now, YouTube's not going to be excited to hear that, but and the advertisers...
Well, I'm sure some of their algorithms might then try and invite more ads later on. Who knows? But it sounds like, especially if you're halfway through a really exciting bit of the YouTube that you want to be watching.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, bang, it goes to an ad. It's like, oh, can you believe that?
Yeah, it's not like the Jeopardy bit in a potential, pre-programmed TV show. Like, oh, here comes the ad because they're about to eliminate someone. Yeah. And it's like, so that's good. I like it.
And I might have said this before, but when you've been doing 401 episodes, Ben, sometimes you forget what you said previously. I don't know if that happens to you. But
5 years away.
The bucket list family. Have I said this before?
Yes, I know you love the bucket list family. Just
if you're a parent and you're thinking, my kids love YouTube, and you think, just submit, go and watch the bucket list family. It does come with a warning. You will feel like the worst parent who ever existed because these two are incredible parents, right? So...
but they're also well supported and funded to be incredible parents to take these people on the journeys that they're going on.
Sold his business for a lazy 30 million, Ben. So,
did he?
No, I think his share was 30. I think we sold it for more to
wow.
to Snapchat. So, but anyway, there you go, folks. YouTube hack. Ben, what's making property news?
Well, I thought it's been a long show, so we'll get to talk a bit more about what's happening more broadly around the difficulties that the private rental market is going through. We're seeing lots of crises around rental affordability and rental crisis in terms of availability. Well, we warned everyone about this in terms of what's happening in terms of people selling their investment properties because the government intervention is making it too hard. Well, I just caught a bit of research out of Western Australia. They're in that critical phase of where they're going to be deciding on new rental tenancy laws over there. And the study it says 60% of investors in Western Australia would sell their properties if the proposed changes to the state rental laws are adopted, signaling a worsening rental crisis. Now, according to the survey of Synergy's Economic Consulting, these two changes are the big ones. The proposed removal of the right of a property owner to terminate a tenancy unless done so on a prescribed grounds, e.g. owners wishing to sell or moving back in. So that was what they were going to do. So again, the owner of the property losing control of their property. And then the proposal to remove the requirements of a tenant to seek consent on property owners to make modifications to the property. So imagine if 60% of the marketplace in WA would just be, it would be obviously a great buying time, but not if, all of this is going to be happening in terms of like the rental crisis would be crazy, right? The rent would go through the roof. And it then goes on to talk about that the study says the changes would cost tenants in the state more than 105 million in extra rents annually, while investors would bear 142.5 million in higher property management costs. Now, there was an article in the Herald Sun here in Melbourne recently, which got a lot of social media play because tenants go, of course, we don't feel empowered, of course. And it's like, even though the intent is good, the unintended consequences are those that the tenants are going to pay 105 million. The investor is going to pay 142 million in additional costs. And we've seen that play out in Victoria. We see people on Twitter and all that say, yep, I sold my investment property because it became too hard in Victoria and I just bought elsewhere. And, Damien Collins, who's the president of the Real Estate Institute in Western Australia, has come out to talk about that, to sort of say it is deeply concerning. And we only need to look at the Victorian case. and they've got a rental crisis over there already, and this is going to add to that rental crisis. So I'm just flabbergasted by the regulators and the people who, where again, intent is right, but execution just falls short, and it causes these types of situations. Now, investors are getting hit with onerous higher interest rates, so they're passing some of that on. They're getting these compliance costs and holding costs that are also going up as well. So it's a really interesting time where we're seeing these regulators who are effectively really disturbing the private rental market. And that's something that obviously, if I'm wearing my picker hat, is of great concern to me. And it should be of great concern, because here's the irony, Bryce, and I'll say this again. When these types of what happens is the governments have to step in and spend billions of dollars, which private investors were happy to do, to actually accommodate this. So what's the net positive here? There is none. There's no net positive. Higher rents or less available stock, more investment from governments, more government spending. I think they've just missed the mark on this, and I'll have more to say about this in the coming weeks and months as well.
Yeah, just be nice if someone took advice from people who understand the property market and see what the unintended consequences would be. Hey, Ben, we get a few people writing into us asking about the Queensland land tax issue. So I just want to say at this point here that one of the reasons we haven't dived deep into that is because there is a plan, there is a strategy. You are talking to a bunch of around that, and at the appropriate time, we'll have more to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one where we have mentioned it earlier on other podcasts. It is the most challenging implementation of a tax or rent theft, income theft that we've ever seen, and it's going to result in higher rents for people who live in Queensland, but also people who live around Australia. So we will have a lot more to say about that. We are doing the models, and we're talking about 300+% increases in costs of holding properties for some investors, where, and even other horrible examples of a no land tax bill to now paying $5,000 to the Queensland government. Now, and that's because they've got properties in other states and territories. So we will be encouraging, active property investors and any property investor who wants to see private rentals survive in this country, to be able to talk to their to their members of parliament, because it's a chronic situation that's evolving here, and it's only going to get worse unless we step in and explain to them the unintended consequences. Because imagine if you own a property price in Melbourne, but you just had we're working out some of these are like $400 a month just to cover the cost of this increase. So imagine if you're sort of saying, well, I can't do that on all my tenants in Queensland. So I'm going to put
so it goes across the group.
So I'm going to put $50 on that property and $30 on that. Everyone is going to be paying Queensland tax revenues, all because the Queensland government are manipulating the marketplace to try and get higher income revenues, which they don't have any jurisdictional power over for those people who bought property in other states and territories as well as Queensland. So it is quite extraordinary. So we'll have a full episode on this, I'm sure, later in the year. The policy has been passed through Parliament as part of their budget package, but in terms of it really takes effect next year. So we want to be talking heavily about that, and we're going to sort of put a campaign together on that one.
And there's a strategy that you've been working with in terms of
well, the big one is we'll do a survey first, Bryce. So we've got a new survey coming out in conjunction with PIPA, their annual survey that they do. So we'll be making sure that we get that in everyone's hands as possible. And there's a series of questions in there which will dictate basically the concerns that property investors have across this country.
Big show, folks. We've covered a lot of ground, and we were super excited to talk to you about the topic today that is close to my heart, as well as Ben's as well. So we will do part 2 of that next week, Ben. But until next week,
knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it.
Act on it. All right, folks. We'll see you next week for part 2. Hey guys, Bryce here again. Just want to catch you before you go and let you know, if you're new to our community, there are a lot of episodes to catch up on, but it's really important that you start from the very beginning at episode number 1. Because episode 1 through to 20 share all of the foundational pillars and frameworks that you need to know to get the best out of listening to this podcast. So I'd recommend that you start there, and the little tip is to maybe start on 1.5 speed. Now, for those of you that are time poor and don't have time to go back from the beginning, don't worry, we've got you covered as well, because we've created a binge guide that goes through all of the details and makes it easy for you to read and get up to speed very, very quickly. So if you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/fast track, you will be able to download that binge guide and you will be up to speed in no time. And whilst you're there, I've got a few extra goodies for you, because we have our top 5 frameworks that you'll learn on this podcast, as well as the Make Money Simple Again ebook, which will help you with the foundations of basic money management, so you'll have everything you need to succeed in building your own lifestyle design and getting the best out of this podcast. Now, just a reminder that anything that we cover on this podcast is not considered financial advice. We certainly recommend that you get your unique circumstances looked at by your individual advisor, and everything we talk about is just general in nature. But folks, I want to encourage you again to go to thepropertycouch.com.au/fast track, and you can go and get all those goodies and catch up right away.